Energy return of investment. So what is this? People have been talking about this concept for decades, actually. And Professor Charles Hall is one of the grandfathers of the eROI concept. I'm claiming here that the net energy efficiency of our energy systems actually is what drives the economic and environmental efficiency of everything we do. So what is eROI? Well, we understand the return of investment monetary-wise. So you put $1 in, hopefully you get $2 out. You have an eROI of 2 to 1. You're very happy. You're just richer than you were before. The same concept exists in energy. You basically have to always dispose or invest energy first before you get energy out. So an example, for a nuclear power plant, you first need to actually dig out uranium, upgrade the uranium. You need to build the power plant. And then once the power plant is running, and once you have the uranium, then you get useful electricity at the end out. But first you have to invest not only money, you also have to invest energy. And when you calculate this investment of energy with the output of usage, that ratio is called the eROI. Relatively simple. So basically the energy return, the eROI, measures the net energy efficiency of a system. Right? I want to put the least energy in and get the most energy out in the shortest period of time. Of course, I also want to invest the least amount of money, obviously. But this is just a pure energy measure. Comparing the eROI, and this is just illustrated from various papers and studies on this, it's a scale. And the most efficient, of course, is nuclear. Nuclear has a very high eROI. Of course, it is expensive. But again, remember, we're talking about energy here. In terms of energy efficiency, it's very high. You need to put very little in to get a lot out. You still need to invest in the power plants, you need to invest in steel and cement and all those things. The second most efficient might be hydro. Hydro is also because you just have to invest into the equipment and then nature does its job, right? Nature then basically the water flows give you almost continuous, almost free power on a continuous basis. But you still have to invest in the equipment, into large dams, a lot of cement, a lot of steel. So the eROI is relatively high for hydro. Interesting is that coal and gas, which is the thermal conversion of basically coal and gas resources into electricity, is probably the third most efficient way of generating electricity. And people are not sure what those numbers are. Maybe it's 20 times efficient, and maybe nuclear is up to 80 times efficient. I don't know. Hydro maybe 30, 40 times efficient. But coal and gas actually today generates 60% of our global electricity. So that gives you a sense how important it is. And this comes to the second measure. When you come to the full cost of electricity, the total cost of generating electricity, you will see that nuclear is very expensive. And hydro is probably a little bit more expensive, and the least of those three is probably coal and gas. Coal is actually even cheaper than gas. So the reason why coal and gas have such a high share in the power system is not only because of the energy efficiency, which is relatively high, but not as high as nuclear, but because of the monetary efficiency. So now what's interesting is wind, solar, and biomass have a very low net energy efficiency. The reason why they have that low energy efficiency has to do with the low energy density that they have or they use, and of course the intermittency for wind and solar, which require additional ancillary systems. Biomass is very energy inefficient because it also requires a large amount of space to build the fuel, basically to then be combusted later in power plants. So, and it turns out that because of this high or low energy density, and because of the intermittency, and because of the total system required in order to make a useful kilowatt hour of electricity out of them, they actually tend to be the most expensive at full cost level. This low eROI is relevant because there's an argument that society needs an eROI of minimum 6 to 10 times to function in today's world. So basically, if we would just have an eROI of 1 to 1, we would just all be sitting here, generating energy for ourselves to survive. But we need to have a multiple in order to play soccer and, to record this video and for you, to go out to the movies. So you need to be energy efficient in your society. And that societal level is probably 6 to 10 times. And there's an argument that wind and solar and biomass actually, on average, over the long term, at the total system level, are below that net energy efficiency level. It's also interesting that the Romans were probably, in the Western nations at least, the most energy efficient society. They had a 2 to 1. And what's also interesting is that the sizes of cities back then did not ever go beyond 1 million. The reason was actually that the energy efficiency was too low. They couldn't get enough energy into the city in the form of food or wood to burn to keep warm, or just even material to build, all energy. So that is why back in old Rome, cities could never go beyond 1 million. Only once coal was found, cities could grow beyond 1 million. Of course, the technological aspect is an important one. Technology improves these efficiencies, right? So the more technology or better technology we have, the more efficient we are in converting the incoming energy into the outgoing energy. There is a third element, which has to do with the material input. So you need to have not only energy, you also need to put money in, which we discussed, but you also need to put raw materials in, which of course is a sustainability issue. Nuclear is very raw material efficient. Coal and gas is relatively raw material efficient. Hydro is not as raw material efficient, and wind and solar and biomass are not raw material efficient at all as well. Again, because of the low energy density, you need to have large areas that need to be covered in order to somehow collect this so-called free energy. And you need to have so many ancillary systems, storage systems, backup systems, transmission systems, which all require a lot of raw materials. So that is why the raw material efficiency of wind, solar, and biomass is relatively low. The fourth element, of course, is the space requirement. So you also need, you need energy to make energy available. You need money, you need raw materials, and you need space. And again, the space is also a sustainability issue. And of course, nuclear is the most efficient. Thermal is probably the second most efficient, still very efficient. Hydro is also efficient, but less so. And because of the low energy density, obviously, wind and solar are also very inefficient when it comes to the space requirement. This is just a slide from the Department of Energy, just showing you the base material input per terawatt of generation for coal, gas, nuclear, hydro, solar, wind, geothermal. And you can just, for the installed capacity, in order to put the capacity up, how much more, and we're talking up to 10 times, 15 times more raw materials required to put up just the installed capacity. We're not yet talking about the total system. And of course, we also not talk about the fuels in this case, which also is required for coal and gas, and nuclear less so, which needs to be put in. And this is something that needs to be studied further. In terms of the space requirement, I think it is no secret. It's quite obvious. You need actually a lot of space for hydropower. For a flat screen TV, you need a lot of wind, a lot of solar, and very little space for coal, nuclear, and natural gas. eROI drives economic and environmental efficiency. Of course, the higher the eROI, the more efficient you are, not only energy-wise, but also economically you tend to become efficient. And of course, environmentally you become efficient, because the more efficient you are in converting primary input energy into output energy, the less resources you need, the less space you need, the less human labor you need, and everything. Of course, also the less emissions you create. I think this concept of eROI is an important one, and I hope I could give you a little bit of a sense of the argument here. And don't forget that we are talking about the generation of energy, of electricity. We're not talking about consumption. When people talk about efficiency, they talk about consumption. How efficient is my car? How efficient is my machine? How efficient is my computer? Or my heat pump, my warming. These are all important arguments. But I'm actually a step further. I'm talking about just the efficiency of producing energy for our daily use.